Hello and welcome to Season 2 of the Black Hole Podcast entitled Femme Party, which is also the title of a book that I've written, and I'm reading it chapter by chapter, episode by episode for Season 2. Today we'll be reading Chapter 10, and before I begin reading, I always precursor by saying any money raised, any profit made from this book will be used to start a technology company similar to the one proposed in the book, and to build a solar farm in my hometown. So find the book on Amazon Kindle by searching Femme Party, or go to either my websites and you'll find a link on there at plotm.com, that's plot, the letter M.com, and Mitch4Mayor.com, that's Mitch, the number 4, Mayor.com. Alright, let's begin Chapter 10. Mitch's Chief of Staff, Sienna Gunther, Staffer Brock Simpson, and Staffer Peter O'Connell are gathered in a conference room at the City County building in Pittsburgh. They all have notepads in front of them, and Sienna starts off the meeting. Sienna says, "Okay, people, we have been tasked with discussing the order and ethics of providing different demographics with the vote in Pittsburgh. We've been given the opportunity to reverse or correct history in how we decide to roll out the direct democracy vote in Pittsburgh." Brock says, "As an African American, I think it's obvious that we allow the Native Americans to vote first, followed by African Americans. It's the right thing to do if we are trying to make up for the history of the United States. These are the demographics that were most disenfranchised." Sienna says, "What about Native Americans, then African American women, then African American men, followed by any other minority that may be disenfranchised thanks to racist voting laws?" Peter says, "Like the Chinese or the Irish." Sienna says, "Get out of here with that Irish BS." Brock says, "The Chinese and Irish were pretty mistreated during the building of the Transcontinental Railroad, but they weren't slaves for hundreds of years." Peter says, "That's why I think they should be considered before the white people get the vote in our city." Sienna says, "Maybe it should just be Native Americans for a while." Brock says, "What, like 100 years? The goal is to get to a point where everyone gets to vote in direct democracy. That is what Mitch promised in his campaign." Peter says, "The votes have already been cast for whether wireless carriers have the permission to broadcast in Pittsburgh. Maybe we should take this opportunity to vote on who ethically should get the right to vote first, instead of a few staffers deciding it in an office." Sienna says, "We're not deciding anything. This is just a forum. I'll put your suggestion in my notes. If we take a vote on it, the largest demographic, which is white people, will probably vote for themselves to receive the vote at the same time as everyone else." Brock says, "We live in a city which has mostly liberal thinkers, so maybe everyone should receive the vote at the same time. I would like to fix history, but that should be done at the federal level." Peter says, "I think the point is that this is the first time a society has offered every member of the right to vote on every issue, and Mitch just wants to make sure it is rolled out in an ethical manner." Mitch knocks on the door and Sienna lets him into the conference room. Mitch says, "How's it going in here?" Sienna says, "We've got some more hashing out to do, but it will all be in my notes." Brock says, "How did the first vote turn out?" Mitch says, "The people of Pittsburgh do not grant permission to the wireless carriers." Peter says, "That's great news. Out of curiosity, why did you put this panel together without a woman of color?" Mitch says, "I just wanted to get some male opinions on the issue. I've already pretty much made up my mind who I will recommend gets the vote first in Pittsburgh." Brock says, "Which demographic are you going with?" Mitch says, "With very few exceptions, women have been subservient to men throughout all of history. It just makes sense to give women the vote first in Pittsburgh." Sienna says, "That will disenfranchise half of your constituency." Mitch says, "Always looking out for my re-election. Men never had the franchise to begin with, so I don't think they will be disenfranchised. They can still vote in general elections for elected officials." Peter says, "So when will people that identify as male get the vote?" Mitch says, "Whenever enough women vote to include the males of the city in the general voting process. Could be a year, could be never." Brock says, "Will the city go along with your recommendation?" Mitch says, "They won't have a choice. I developed the voting site, and as a condition of acquiring a free voting site for the city, they will have to grant women the exclusive right to vote. Otherwise, the city will have to develop its own voting site. Sienna says, we'll get the votes from City Council, especially when we present these other avenues for ruling out the vote. We can say we've considered all avenues, and women first is the most ethical rollout. How can they deny that women have been indentured servants for tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years? Mitch is in his office at the City County building in Pittsburgh. Sienna lets the CEO of UPMC, Ted Harrison, into the office. Mitch and Ted exchange formalities. Mitch says, what can I do for you, Ted? Ted says, I want to talk to you about your plan for UPMC to pay property taxes. I'm sure you expected a visit from me. Mitch says, I did. I realize it's your job to save your company money, but we're talking about free health care for minority citizens. These citizens have some of the worst infant mortality rates in the nation, and that's in our city. I want to get these people the care they need. Ted says, I want to help as well, but we're talking about a huge tax bill. You criticized us for our executive compensation, but you are compensated millions of dollars from your company. Mitch says, that's true, but my company is a private company, not a nonprofit. I believe nonprofits should be managed by a volunteer team of executives. Ted says, that may work for charities, but not for a large hospital system. You need cohesion over the whole system, which requires a traditional leadership structure. Is there any way you will work with us if this passes? Mitch says, I can make suggestions when I propose the ordinance for vote. Things that you should have probably done years ago. Ted says, what things are you talking about? Mitch says, as you know, I've already suggested that your contributions to the Pittsburgh Promise be subtracted from your tax burden. I will also suggest that any monies you spend developing direct democracy within your hospital system will be deductible as well. Ted says, how do you mean? Mitch says, I mean that I think that the patients at your children's hospital should be able to vote on how the research being collected on them is disseminated. I believe they should choose who gets this life-saving information. Instead of the hospital and its board or individual physicians deciding how they share the information, you should devote a staff to propose different ways and places to share the information. The children should be able to contribute their ideas as well. Ted says, maybe we should have done this years ago. It is largely research being collected on terminally ill children. As far as I know, we don't charge other hospital systems for this information or profit from it in any way. Mitch says, as far as you know, other companies may profit from the treatments. Medical discoveries should be free to anyone in any country. I have faith that the children in that hospital will foster a better way to get the treatments out to those that need them. Ted says, you believe that children will come up with better ways to disseminate important medical research than medical professionals? Mitch says, I do if the information is properly presented to them. Let's say, hypothetically, a nation decides to use its own tax money to produce a life-saving treatment and distribute it to the world for free. I want to make sure if a nation decides to do this, the patients within your hospital system can vote to release the research collected to that nation. Ted says, so we develop our own system of direct democracy. How else can we reduce what we hypothetically have to pay in taxes? Mitch says, you should also warn patients about the dangers of wireless waves and let them vote on whether Children's Hospital has Wi-Fi incorporated into its information structure. Any money you spend at Children's Hospital or any of your other hospitals within the city limits on retrofitting the information structure to a wired internet structure and eliminating Wi-Fi will be deductible. Ted says, what do you mean? Mitch says, I mean you explain that wireless waves could cause cancer, then let your patients vote on whether they want Wi-Fi in their rooms. Any money you spend eliminating Wi-Fi will be used to reduce your tax burden. Ted says, but these medical device companies are making equipment that only connects to Wi-Fi. Mitch says, the only way to get hardwired equipment is for a large hospital system to go against the grain and say we want that specific type of equipment. Ted says, we'll have to rewire hundreds of rooms with Ethernet cables. It could take years to do and is a significant investment. What is the point as long as there are wireless waves being broadcast from towers? Mitch says the point is that the cancer-causing waves aren't being emitted from 5 feet above their heads. It's reducing exposure and building the infrastructure needed for after we vote to eliminate all wireless waves. Then the research gathered on brain cancer or tumors at your hospitals can be used to cross-reference with other hospitals. That is, if you release that information so that the patients can vote on how they want it used. Ted says, I'll present your proposals to the board and develop a plan. I have to say, from a business perspective, I hope this new city tax code doesn't pass, but I'm glad to hear you are at least willing to work with us. Mitch says there is one other thing I would like to work with you on. It's an online marketplace for medical supplies. Ted says, those already exist. What makes yours different? Mitch says, I believe we are one pandemic away from people hoarding medical supplies like personal protective equipment or PPE. We want to partner with hospitals and other systems that use a lot of PPE to act as a second warehouse for these organizations. Ted says, a second warehouse? You'll have to explain that. Mitch says, your hospital system has a warehouse for supplies and you rotate the stock so that the PPE stays fresh. Our marketplace would allow the public to buy specific PPE items that come to them sealed with a QR code on them. The marketplace keeps track of inventory within a city for the hospitals in that city. When the PPE that an individual is storing at their house nears expiration, that person is able to sell their PPE to the hospital to be used before it expires. The hospital gets discounted PPE, and the consumer gets some money back for the PPE they never used. The consumer will probably replenish their supply and store a new round of PPE at their home until it nears expiration. As long as the supplies are still sealed and the QR code is intact, they can sell to the hospital again and again. Basically, people's homes in one city become a second warehouse for a hospital system like yours. Ted says, interesting. This marketplace could help reduce counterfeit PPE being sold domestically during an emergency. I'll have to run it past the board, but this sounds like an interesting venture. After an 8-hour day at City Hall, Mitch makes his way to the headquarters in the old brewery. He finds Major General Gall waiting in his office. The general is facing the door as Mitch enters and is pointing a grill lighter in Mitch's direction. He pulls the trigger and the lighter ignites. General Gall says, hands where I can see them. Raising his hands, Mitch says, that's a hell of a way to spark a conversation. They shake hands and take seats within the office. Mitch says, congratulations on the success of your line of refillable lighters. General Gall says, thank you for your contribution. Mitch says, how are things going in Barbuda as far as the flight program? General Gall says, it's much safer doing laps around the island in the U-5 helicopter than trying to navigate down the French Creek. Mitch says, I figured that would be the case. General Gall says, do you have the prototypes for the hardware? Mitch says, I do. We figured that to be successful as a computer hardware company, we would need to launch a mobile phone and a laptop computer. Both revolve around this design for an advanced battery. Mitch holds up a small cylinder that is about 3/8 inch thick and 5 inches long. The battery is threaded at one end. On the other end is a cap connected to the battery that has a rough outer rim for screwing the battery into a device. There is also a rubber gasket at the thumb screw end of the battery. Mitch says, this rechargeable battery screws into our smartphone, but is easily removable to totally disable the phone. The laptop holds up to 10 of these batteries that also screw in from the side. The batteries can be recharged in either device or have a separate charger that screws into the battery itself. Mitch holds up a mobile phone that is the average size of a smartphone but a bit thicker to accommodate the battery. It has multiple buttons along the sides and a home button at the bottom of the touchscreen on the face of the phone. On the opposite side is a camera array complete with flash. Mitch says, this phone is different in many ways from your average smartphone. It is equipped with an antenna that is able to pick up the widest range of radio signals ever attempted in a mobile telephone. The phone can pick up AM/FM channels, weather channels, emergency channels, and even satellite channels. The phones can be used as military-grade two-way radios by pushing this button on the side. You can save other two-way phones and walkie-talkie signatures within the phone so you can see who you are communicating with. The two-way radio function has a 30-mile range. General Gall says that will really cut down on data usage. Mitch says, if it ever makes the civilian market, it will be a game changer. General Gall says, when mobile phones first came out, wasn't there a carrier that offered phones with two-way radios? Mitch says, yes, there was a carrier that had phones like that. It just displays how much of a scam it all really is. Wireless carriers decided they would make much more money charging for every transaction, and those phones disappeared. There is no reason why every wireless phone shouldn't have a built-in walkie-talkie feature. General Gall says, what else does your phone do? Mitch says, here's what I am really proud of. These phones have a built-in watch key that pops up out of the side here. There is a spring-loaded watch movement built into the smartphone. When you wind this key, the phone charges itself. If the battery is removed or totally dead, the phone is designed to allow the user to take pictures in a low-power mode. Therefore, the picture is not displayed on the screen. The screen never powers up, but if there is a wireless signal of any kind, including satellite, the picture will be stamped with the date, time, latitude, and longitude. The picture is then stored internally. General Gall says, so can the thumb-sized crank on the side fully charge a battery? Mitch says, it would take most of a day of cranking every 30 seconds, but yes, it is capable of charging a battery screwed into the phone. General Gall says, what is the purpose of the low-power camera function? Mitch says, these phones can be distributed to all corners of the globe. The users may not have signal, but they can play games or find other uses for the phones. The camera function is designed to take a picture of a rocket being fired in remote portions of the Earth. Say a foreign government is testing rockets or launching satellites in a rainforest in South America. This phone would allow a villager to capture the launch even if the battery is dead. General Gall says, then this villager could send the evidence to the UN when they are able to connect to the internet. Mitch says, thanks to the software we designed for these devices, the smartphone is able to connect to the internet through the mini USB charging port. Most phones and tablets only connect to the internet through wireless waves. General Gall says, tell me about the laptop. Mitch says, as you can see, it is built of a sturdy design. It has all the same features as the smartphone, but the laptop is easy to take apart and remove the antenna if you want to make the computer incapable of outside interference. The computer comes preloaded with the video tutorial of how to take the antennae out of the device. General Gall says, very good. I knew you would come up with something great for the Pentagon. Mitch says, there is one other thing, General. We are working on software for both devices designed to help during urban warfare. The devices will allow you to identify radio towers and enter them into a mapping system as waypoints. Therefore, even if the mapping system isn't accurate, a driver navigating an urban setting can use the radio towers within a city to help navigate in and out of a hot zone. General Gall says, are you going to produce more than these two devices? He says, we want to design more products the military can use, incorporating this battery system. We are talking about simple two-way radios, flashlights, laser sights. We are even thinking about a vaporizer. General Gall says, like a nicotine vaporizer? Mitch says, yes, it screws into the end of the battery. We want to help military personnel quit tobacco. The only reason we are considering it is that we want to make a vapor liquid based on caffeine. This would allow people to switch from smoking tobacco to inhaling caffeine, which has many of the same effects. We're hoping this will help wean people off of nicotine. General Gall says, very good. We'll look forward to future prototypes, and I'll take these two devices to the Pentagon for them to review. You can expect our order in the next few months. Mitch says, as soon as we receive it, I will take it to the board. We've begun putting things in place to launch these two devices. Thank you, General. It's a weekend in spring, and Mitch and his spouse are at Doc's farm. Mitch has been busy putting forward the agenda he laid out in his interviews. Lucy and Angelina have been working to expand their programs to all of Venango County. Angelina has come to the farm for a lunch with Hillary and Mitch. After the meal, Angelina and Mitch take a walk along French Creek. Angelina says, Lucy and I are really excited about the formation of the Femme Party. Both of us have officially changed our affiliation. I have talked to women at the UN that want us to put forward a presidential candidate for next year. Mitch says, I'm glad the two of you spearheaded the formation of the party. Either one of you two would make a great president. You should hold a convention in Pittsburgh and vote on a candidate. The city would be happy to have you. Angelina says, we have been reaching out to other rural counties in Pennsylvania and other states and helping them start funds for electric vehicles. They are becoming quite popular thanks to your show and the upcoming charity race. Mitch says, that's good. I just wish the cost of these vehicles would come down with their popularity. Angelina says, some of these counties are using the Litterbug app now that it is past beta testing. Mitch says, that's great, Angelina. As you know, we have established an EV fund in Pittsburgh. Different neighborhoods are voting on where to put the automatic speed limit signs that issue a fine payable to the fund. I wanted to talk to you about the next phase of the Litterbug app. Angelina says, I think I know where this is headed, but I'm listening. Mitch says, it's a new app, but it functions just like the Litterbug app by buffering video on a dash-mounted smartphone. I'm thinking of calling it the Traffic app. Angelina says, will this be developed through the company? Mitch says, I hope it's approved. The Traffic app allows people to document aggressive drivers and drivers that don't signal their intention with their electronic signal. The user can use voice commands to capture and save video of these drivers and send them to the police for a review. Angelina says, so when someone doesn't signal, they get a fine payable to the EV fund. Mitch says, that's right. And the app can be used to police all traffic violations, not just the easiest one, which is not signaling. Angelina says, sure, not using a signal is the easiest to prove using video, but other violations may be captured. Mitch says, yes, and there is a feature where the user can add commentary to the video so that the police can hear exactly what traffic violation occurred and decide what to do from there. Angelina says, will there be an option to offer a warning to violators like the speed limit signs? Mitch says, that will be up to vote. But I am suggesting that drivers of electric vehicles get up to 10 warnings per year for minor violations. As with the minor speeding violations, we are altering the traffic laws of Pittsburgh so that minor infractions don't add violation points to a person's record, which leads to suspension. Angelina says, so it's just fines payable to the EV fund in an effort to improve the overall driving skills of the Pittsburgh population. Mitch says, we want to make it more expensive to drive a carbon-emitting vehicle than it is to drive a non-carbon-emitting vehicle. But if you drive safely and follow the laws, the cost will be dependent on the same factors as everywhere else in the nation. Angelina says, do you picture a city where only electric vehicles, public transportation, and bicycles roam the streets? Mitch says, if that is the direction the population of females in Pittsburgh votes, I am all for it. I think it makes for a safer city. Basically, this app brings us one step closer to policing ourselves, which goes hand in hand with direct democracy. Angelina says, it also empowers people to report aggressive driving. I've been on countless California highways where I have seen extremely stupid and aggressive moves by drivers speeding and weaving through traffic. I have to admit, I wished I had an app like this at my disposal when I saw these jaw-dropping acts. Mitch says, finally, with our license plate identification software, average citizens can make the streets and highways a safer place. Angelina says, I assume you will beta test this one in Pittsburgh if it is approved. Mitch says, that's my plan, but I will make it available to you and Lucy as soon as possible to offer in the Litterbug and speed limit sign package to other counties. Angelina says, are you going to make it down to Barbuda next Saturday for the charity Electric Vehicle 500? You and Hillary can stay on my yacht if you would like. Mitch says, unfortunately, I have too much going on in the city and with the company to make the trip, but thank you for the offer. We always have fun sharing a space with you and your family. So that's the end of chapter 10. Before I get to my sponsors, I always end the chapter by saying there are some interesting ideas in this book for both patents and technology startups or things that could be developed by existing technology companies. I've kept some ideas that I'd like to develop myself by creating a technology startup, and I'm hoping that season 3 of this podcast will be a play-by-play of how I started a technology startup. The idea I want to start with is a social media platform designed to fight misinformation on the internet. I'm looking for computer science people to partner up with me. I've saved some money to invest in the business side, such as bank account, incorporating, things like that. But I need computer science people that can invest some of their time and delay compensation possibly until the business is profitable. If you'd like to hear a description of the social media platform, you can fill out a contact form on either of my websites, plotm.com or mitchvermeer.com, and I will email you a description of the social media platform to see if you're interested. Also, if you'd like to invest, the same goes. Just specify whether you're a computer science person or an investor. Get to my sponsors. Look into French Creek Farms in Utica, Pennsylvania. It's family camping at its best, with campsites and cottages along the French Creek. Come to Krabby Kelly's in Utica, Pennsylvania. It's a bar and general store. Get your STDs at Krabby Kelly's. That's snacks, tobacco, and drinks. Planning a trip to Incheon, South Korea? Plan on stopping by Liquor Burger. Get yourself a burger and a mug of suds at Liquor Burger. Do you need a logo or design embroidered or screen printed on a garment of clothing? Look no further than 542 Prints. Go to 542prints.com to contact us for your next design. Do you enjoy outdoor video of hiking, kayaking, and biking? Then look into Disability TV. It's a channel on YouTube. Search Disability TV and subscribe today. Our long-term goals are to form a trading card company for sports and to have a collective of all disabled people as photographers for this trading card company. Most sports are played in handicap accessible buildings, so it makes sense that disabled people could become photographers for such a company. Thanks for listening, and tune in next time for Chapter 11.